I'm not saying Ridley's an asshole.
For nearly 40 years, Hollywood has sold us one version of Sean Young, the difficult star, the woman who lost it all after Blade Runner, and the actress who became an industry punchline for her supposedly unstable behavior. You've heard the stories: the homemade Catwoman suit, the burned bridges, and the crazy label that followed her for decades. But what if that version was a carefully crafted lie? Behind the headlines lies a much darker reality involving some of the industry's most powerful men. Was Sean Young truly impossible to work with, or was she the victim of a systematic campaign to silence her? Today, we're looking past the official record to uncover the truth Hollywood tried to bury. Was she actually difficult, or was she just a target? Sean Young was born Mary Sean Young on November 20th, 1959, in Louisville, Kentucky. Her father was a television producer and journalist. Her mother was a screenwriter and PR executive. As a teenager, she trained at the Interlochen Arts Academy in Michigan in classical ballet, which means discipline, precision, and the development of a physical intelligence that most people never acquire. She also attended the School of American Ballet in New York City. At first, she started modeling to pay the bills. She started landing auditions. Her film debut came in 1980 in Jane Austen in Manhattan. Small, but enough to get her in the room. And then, in 1981, the room got considerably larger. Stripes was a box office hit, a screwball military comedy with Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, John Candy, and a cast that had been assembled for the specific purpose of controlled chaos. Sean Young played MP Lewis Cooper, opposite P.J. Soles. The role was not large. The film was dominated by male energy of a very specific kind. But she held her own with an ease that people on set noticed, a relaxed, natural presence, and an ability to be genuinely funny without demanding the frame. She was 21 years old. She was learning, and she was getting noticed in the ways that would, within a year, put her in a film that would redefine science fiction. Blade Runner arrived in 1982. Ridley Scott directing, Harrison Ford as the Blade Runner, assigned to hunt down rogue replicants in a rain-soaked, neon-lit version of Los Angeles that the genre has been in conversation with ever since. It was not a commercial success at the time. The film was polarizing. The studio interfered with the theatrical cut. And audiences in 1982 were not necessarily prepared for what they were being asked to receive. But critics noticed Sean Young's performance immediately, and over the decades, as Blade Runner became not just a cult classic, but one of the defining works of 20th century science fiction, so did Rachel. She played the character with a quality of stillness that was almost unbearable to watch. Not the stillness of emptiness, but the stillness of a person trying desperately to hold themselves together, managing the gap between who they are and what they have been told about themselves. It is a role that requires an actress to do something most cannot, to play suppression without disappearing, to be simultaneously present and contained, and to show the thing underneath without letting it surface. Young did this so completely that the performance has outlasted the film's every other element in cultural memory. Ask anyone who has seen Blade Runner what they remember, and Rachel is one of the first things they name. What the audience did not know, what almost no one knew for decades, was what was happening behind the camera during the making of that performance. In an interview years later, Young described the love scene in the film as incredibly aggressive and uncomfortable to film. She said Ridley Scott had pursued her romantically from the beginning of production. She had declined. She was not interested. She kept her boundaries clear. Scott then began dating Joanna Cassidy, the actress playing Zora. Young said she felt relieved when that happened. The tension, she thought, would ease. And then came the scene. The one in which Harrison Ford's character shoves Rachel across the room, blocks the door, and pins her against the wall. Young said she believed the aggressive staging was Scott's retaliation. I think Ridley was like, "F you," she said. Why did this have to be like that? What was the point of that? I think it was Ridley's none too subtle message that he was getting even with me. Scott never hired her again. The scene in the finished film is framed as a love scene. The saxophone begins. The tone shifts. The film treats what has just been depicted, a physically coercive encounter in which the woman's refusals are overridden, as the beginning of a romance. Audiences watched it as such. Critics did not remark on it. The industry moved on. Sean Young did not move on. She could not. The director whose retaliation had been filmed and preserved in one of the most beloved science fiction films ever made had closed every door at that level of Hollywood to her, quietly and permanently, before her career had truly begun. Dune came in 1984. David Lynch directing and adapting Frank Herbert's dense and beloved novel with a cast that represented some of the most interesting talent the industry had assembled in years. Young was cast as Chani, the love interest of the protagonist. It was a significant role in the source material. In the film, it was condensed into near invisibility. The production was, by all accounts, a controlled disaster. Lynch would later disown it. The studio cut the film into something that satisfied neither the director nor the fans of the novel. Sean Young appeared on screen in a role that had been reduced to a background presence and delivered what she could with the material she was given. Dune failed commercially. It failed critically. And Sean Young walked away from it with the same credit she had entered with. Then came No Way Out in 1987, and for a brief and brilliant stretch, everything seemed to turn. The film was a political thriller, tight, intelligent, propulsive, and it gave Young the kind of role she had not yet been afforded, a character of genuine complexity, a woman with agency and danger, and the full range of human emotion available to her in the same scene. She played Susan Atwell opposite Kevin Costner, who was himself on the edge of becoming one of the biggest names in American film. They had chemistry, real chemistry, the kind that the camera recognizes and that audiences feel as a physical fact. The New York Times called her performance bold and electric. Audiences showed up. The film made huge money, and for the first time since Blade Runner, the industry began to treat her as someone whose name on a poster moved tickets. She was 27 years old. She had Stripes, Blade Runner, Dune, and No Way Out on her resume, a run that by any standard announced a major actress in full arrival. That is when Wall Street happened, and with it, Oliver Stone. Stone had just come off Platoon. He was in the most powerful position of his career, an Academy Award winner, a director whom the industry treated with the particular reverence it reserves for men who have been declared serious. The film he was making would go on to define a decade's worth of conversation about greed and its consequences. The cast included Michael Douglas, Charlie Sheen, and dozens of others. Sean Young was cast as the wife of Gordon Gekko, a role with potential, visible on screen alongside Michael Douglas in the film that was going to matter. What happened on that set has never been disputed in its basic facts, only in what it means. Charlie Sheen was, by Young's account, and by the general understanding of what Sheen was doing in that period of his life, using cocaine heavily on set. He wrote the word cunt on a piece of tape and stuck it to Sean Young's back. Michael Douglas, who discovered what it said, removed it without telling her what it had been. The man who did it faced no consequences. The film crew moved on. Then came the moment that ended her involvement with the production entirely. Daryl Hannah was on set. She had been asked to wear a backless dress that she was not comfortable wearing. Sean Young looked at Oliver Stone and said simply, "Oliver, why would you want her to wear a dress she doesn't feel comfortable in?" Stone asked her to step outside. She left the trailer. When she returned, he had taken her only line in the scene and given it to Hannah instead. She went to him and asked directly what the point of her being in the scene was if she had no lines. Stone's response was immediate. "You're right. You're fired." She went to her trailer, collected her belongings, and was escorted to a car. She assumed the driver was taking her back to Manhattan. He dropped her at the bus station. She had been punished for advocating on behalf of a colleague who was being made uncomfortable by a director with the power to make her disappear. The punishment was exile from the film, public humiliation, and the beginning of the process by which her name would become attached to the word difficult in every conversation about who she was. She said later, with the particular economy of someone who has had decades to find the right words, "If this is how you get your rocks off." The same year, Harvey Weinstein. Young had been hired to work on a Miramax production. The encounter she described was not ambiguous. Weinstein exposed himself to her. Her response was direct. "I really wouldn't be pulling that thing out because it's really not pretty. Put that little thing away." The line has become, in the years since the full scale of Weinstein's behavior became public knowledge, one of the more celebrated responses to his conduct. It is funny, in the black way, that responses to sexual harassment are sometimes funny when the person being harassed is quick enough and unafraid enough to say the thing that cuts. It is also a description of a 27-year-old woman in the middle of her career being placed in a position that no one should have to navigate. This is when, she has said, she began to develop a bad reputation for saying no. Then came James Woods and the Boost in 1988. Woods and Young had an affair during the production. The relationship ended. In 1989, Woods filed a lawsuit alleging harassment and stalking, claiming Young had threatened him and his fiancée repeatedly after the affair concluded. Woods ultimately dropped the suit and recanted all of his allegations against Young. He was ordered to pay her legal fees. The legal outcome was unambiguous. Young had done nothing wrong, and Woods had made claims that he could not and did not sustain. The industry did not process it that way. What the industry processed was the lawsuit itself, the headlines, the spectacle, the tabloid coverage of a female actress being accused of unstable behavior by a male actor who was, by the late 1980s, a person of considerable professional standing. The lawsuit was filed at exactly the moment when Sean Young's name was beginning to carry momentum, when No Way Out had established her as someone whose career was ascending. Its effect was not legal, it was reputational. The negative publicity hurt her career in ways that the eventual legal victory could not undo. She has talked about this with a bluntness that is worth quoting directly. "He actually was successful in destroying my studio career, but I was given more chances. I just got fed up. I remember I got hired by an agent, and he grilled me for an hour about James Woods, and I was like, oh, So I have to walk in every time now and explain why I'm not crazy? I don't see this guy having to explain anything, so what the is your problem? Batman arrived in 1989, and Young had been cast as Vicky Vale weeks before production began. Rehearsals happened, read-throughs happened. She was in the film. And then, during pre-production, she fell from a horse and broke her arm. She was replaced by Kim Basinger, who delivered a fine performance and received a fraction of the scrutiny that Young would have faced. She did not stop. She could not stop. She was still, at that point, fighting for a career that had been more than earned, that represented over a decade of serious work at the highest levels of the industry. Batman Returns was announced. Tim Burton was directing. Catwoman was the role being cast. What she did next has been described for 35 years as evidence of instability. The homemade Catwoman costume, the appearance on The Joan Rivers Show in character, the arrival at the Warner Brothers lot. Here is what is almost never said about it. It worked as a demonstration of commitment and creativity in every way except the one that mattered. It demonstrated that she had not been broken, that the years of professional punishment had not extinguished the engine, that she was still fighting, still willing to do the unconventional thing, still present. Michelle Pfeiffer got the role. Pfeiffer's Catwoman is, by wide consensus, one of the defining performances of that era of superhero cinema. Young's costume appearance became the story the industry told about her instead, the punchline, the proof of what everyone had been saying. The media had what it needed, the woman in the costume, the unstable actress who wouldn't accept the answer, no. The irony was complete, if you were paying attention. The woman who had spent years being punished for refusing to say yes was now being mocked for refusing to accept no. Jim Carrey arrived in 1994, and with him came something that Sean Young had almost stopped expecting from the industry. Someone with power who used it for her. Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. Morgan Creek Productions wanted someone else for the role of Lieutenant Lois Einhorn. Carrey wanted Young. He went to the producers and made his position clear. Jim came in and said, "No, no, no. Whatever you're hearing is bull. She's great, and I got the part," Young has said. He's the only leading man who ever did that for me. Read that sentence carefully. She was, by 1994, someone who had delivered performances in Blade Runner, Dune, No Way Out, and Wall Street. She had been cast in, and then lost, Batman. She had worked opposite Harrison Ford, Kevin Costner, Michael Douglas, and Charlie Sheen. She had delivered work that critics had praised, and that audiences remembered decades later. And Jim Carrey, a comedian at the peak of his commercial power, was the only leading man in her career who had ever advocated for her with a studio. The film was a hit. Carrey's performance made it a cultural landmark. Young played her role, the villain whose identity is the film's central twist, with the professional competence she had always brought to whatever she was given. The role did not elevate her back into the tier she had occupied before the machinery had processed her, but it was work, and it was work that Jim Carrey had made possible by being, in her words, the only one who showed up. The years after Ace Ventura were quieter. Not empty, she kept working in the indie circuit, in television, and in the kinds of projects that did not generate magazine covers, but that kept a career technically alive. The Young and the Restless on daytime television, guest spots, small films with modest ambitions, and occasional flashes of the genuine talent that the industry had systematically undervalued. She has won her battle with alcohol. She has said so plainly and with the directness that was always her most consistent quality. When Blade Runner 2049 was made in 2017, 35 years after the original, Sean Young was given a 30-second hologram cameo, her character Rachel, reconstructed and glimpsed briefly, in a film that ran nearly 3 hours and that made much of its connection to the original. "Wasn't that so full of shit?" she said. "It was very clear that they knew the audience would be upset that I wasn't in it. But they didn't want me to bitch about that publicly. So they paid me some money, made me sign a non-disclosure agreement, and gave me 30 seconds. She has said she always felt down to earth and straightforward with people, but later realized she may have been perceived as offensive. "That was not my intention," she said. "I only got offensive later because I started getting pissed off. Like, this is serious. This is my career. You don't just blacklist me. It's terrible." The industry read the second stage and wrote the entire story in its light. The woman who got angry, the woman who fought back, the woman who was difficult. It did not ask what had happened in the years between directness and anger. It was not interested in the cause. It had the effect it needed, and the effect made a much tidier story. At 66, Sean Young is still here. Married, she and Robert Lujan divorced, remarried, and, by recent accounts, have continued to build a life together. 2 sons, Rio and Quinn. Quinn worked on Blade Runner 2004 on the visual arts team, his mother having forgiven the industry its 30-second offering in exchange for something that actually mattered. She speaks in recent interviews with the particular tone of someone who has stopped needing the industry to validate what she already knows about herself. The anger is present, but it is not consuming. The humor, which was always there, which the tabloids never had much use for, is intact. She has said what she wanted to say about the men who shaped the story that was told about her. She has named them Ridley Scott, Oliver Stone, Harvey Weinstein, James Woods. She has said what each of them did and what it cost her. She has done so with her name attached and her face visible, without the protection of anonymity or the softening of diplomacy. That is not the behavior of someone who cannot manage reality. That is someone who has decided, after decades of being told her version of events was not credible, that the record deserves correction. The woman in the Catwoman suit walking onto the Warner Brothers lot in 1992 was not crazy. She was a talented actress who had been systematically removed from consideration for major roles by men who punished her for saying no, and who was trying the only thing left available to her, showing up, making herself visible, and refusing to be erased. Hollywood called it a breakdown. It was, in fact, the opposite. If Sean Young's story reached something in you today, share it with someone who should know it. Subscribe so the next story finds you at the right moment.